This book is really an untold story of how women have battled one another. They've battled one another in the home, in the workplace, and at the school gate. My research shows that the strong hand of history lies at the root of our differences of opinion when it comes to women and work. I think my story is the story of millions of women. In the early 1970s, I got married very young. I didn't have a degree, and I had a baby, and I looked after my husband. I made all my family's clothes, I made jam, I even made rosehip syrup. I was a proper earth mother. When I look at pictures of me at that time, it's almost as if I'm looking at somebody else. In the intervening years, I got myself a degree, I had 2 more children, and I managed to have quite a successful career as a television producer and a writer. Like many women, I never felt I quite got any of it right. So I was really keen in this book to look at why it was that it's such a struggle for so many people and whether we can learn lessons from history. I've been doing lots of research, and I found that libraries and universities like the LSE here are full of books and periodicals and research about women's struggle for equality. But something's strangely absent, and it's the story of women's attitudes towards one another during all these years. The suffragettes themselves couldn't agree about which way was the best way. Some approved of direct action and some approved of negotiation. Throughout history, women have struggled with their choices about work and family, but there's one notable exception in history, and that's the period during the 2 world wars. Throughout the First and Second World War, women suddenly came out of the home, and they were sort of allowed to do those things because of necessity. One of the great scandals, if you like, of social engineering is the way that after those 2 world wars, women were persuaded that they should go back into the home and give up all aspirations to work outside it. One of the most amazing things about the 1950s housewife was, I suppose, in order to explain her situation, she became so critical of women who worked. It wasn't until the 1970s that women were really galvanised and the so-called women's liberation movement was born. And those feminists did achieve equality for women in the long term, but they were thanked in a way with a heap of vilification from other women who saw them as a threat. In the 1980s, the have-it-all working mother was born. Today, over 2/3 of women with children do work, but there's strong evidence of a backlash against this. This generation of young women having children now are the first generation to have been raised by predominantly working mothers, and a lot of them are rejecting that desire to have a career and opting for a more domestic life instead. It's time that we started to reassess what the impact of that kind of historical pressure has been and think about whether or not we can really change the way women feel about work and family going forward.